All right, Shavuot, say good morning. Let us begin. Beautiful daf ahead of us today. Today's daf is Daf Yud. Let's begin by thanking our sponsors. Our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Tishrei. Baruch Hashem Abba Aleinu L'Tova. Avraham and Shaindy Kelman for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in memory of their parents. Dr. Linda Weinberg for dedicating all the Shir and Drushos this month in loving memory of the commemoration of the first yahrzeit of her husband, Dr. Paul Weinberg, Peretz Moshe ben Avraham David. Our week of learning sponsors, Hillary Jacobson Kent and Yisrael Daniel Jacobson, in commemoration of the yahrzeit of Milt Jacobson, Mordechai Menashe ben Shmaryo, and the Rosen and Miller families as a zechus for refuah shalema for Chaim Yosef ben Batya. I'm sorry, and I neglected to add for the Talmud Torah sponsors, Jack Bennett, in memory of Givati Brigade First Sergeant Nikolai Rappaport. We hope that in the merit of our Talmud Torah, all of the Neshamos Sahav and Aliyah, the families in Nechama, and those who require a refuah will have one together with Kol Cholei Yisrael. With that, let us begin. So today's daf is Daf Yud 10, and we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Yud. We're picking up 4 lines down from the top. Maybe is it the volume? Can you hear it? Yeah, it's okay, good. Thank you. So it says, remember again, we're picking up today with the sugi that we left off with yesterday, which is the contrasting of the shitos of Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. Remember again, thank you so much, from the previous Mishnah of Kisei Hadam, it sounded like Beis Shammai was the Mekel on Simchas Yom Tiv, and Beis Hillel was the Machmir. We've been contrasting that with this particular discussion we're having over here regarding the latter, and trying to figure out who's the Machmir, who's the Mekel. Says the Gemara, Ela ikashi hakashi. If you have any question, here's going to be the question. We'll say Yud Amud Aleph 10a, 4 lines down from the top. Beis Shammai Omrim, a note ha'ali lekatzev alav basar. We're going to run through a number of cases today. We're going to see each of these cases in depth inside of the Gemara, but we're going to begin in Meretz Hashem to go through them today. So, for example, Beis Shammai say you can't take the ali or the ali, right? What's the ali? Rashi says over here, daf of the kaved. It is a thick and heavy plank. So we'll say in a mortar and a pestle. This is the pestle. Right? So if you can imagine, this was a long, heavy plank used to crush things. Now the act of crush, now Rashi says, the kochin bochitim letigris vitisni, you use it to crush wheat. So Beis Shammai v'havi malachto le'iser. Now we'll see, here's what's interesting. This is what's called in halacha, klisha malachto le'iser. So klisha malachto le'iser in Hilchos Muktzah means a utensil whose primary purpose is prohibited on Shabbos. But may have a secondary permitted purpose. Now, what's the secondary permitted purpose of this wheat grinding pestle? Well, it's long and it's flat. So you can actually use it as what? As a cutting board. So that's the shayla over here. So Beis Shammai says, you can't go ahead and use the pestle to go ahead and cut meat up on it on Yom Tiv, because it's Beis Shammai will say that it's muktzah. Beis Hillel matirin, and Beis Hillel says it's mutter. So Beis Hillel allows you to move the pestle, even though the pestle is or the ali, because it's a klisha malachto le'iser, but because you're going to be using it in a way that enhances your simchas Yom Tiv, you're permitted to do it. Alma gabi simchas Yom Tiv Beis Shammai l'chon Beis Hillel kula. What do you see from here? You see from here that when it comes to matters of Simchas Yom Tiv, Beis Shammai is Machmir, Beis Hillel is Mekel. To which the Gemara says, but one second, how do you reconcile that with the following? Or Minhi, Hashochit Chayiv Va'of, if a person shechts a Chayiv or an Oaf, Beis Shammai and Abba say, see, all roads lead back to that Kisei Hadam case. Because what happened in Kisei Hadam? Beis Shammai said, as long as you've got a shovel in the ground, then what? You're good to go. Beis Hillel said, no, you need to have actual dirt prepared from before Yom Tiv, which in that case sounds like Beis Shammai is the Mekel, Beis Shammai is the lenient one, and Beis Hillel is the Machmir. To which the Gemara says, Am Rabbi Yochanan muchlaf es hashita. I suppose Rabbi Yochanan, he feels the easiest way to reconcile these things is to switch around the opinions. Now I will say, which opinion are you switching around? We are assuming that the Mishnah by Kisei Hadam is correct. That's what we'll assume. Therefore, Beis Shammai is the Mekel by Simchas Yom Tov, Beis Hillel is the Machmir. And therefore, again, just switch around the sheet as by the Ali, by the Pestle over here. So it's Beis Shammai who allows you to use it, it's Beis Hillel who prohibits it. Okay. To which the Gemara says, Mimai. We'll say, here's what's interesting. The Rabbi Yochanan proposes that because he makes the assumption that halacha lamaisa, everything kind of has to gel with each other, right? He makes the assumption that everything, we'll say, so sometimes in life, when everything has to make sense, everything has to fall into place, so you have to make a lot of terutzim, but sometimes when you accept the fact that not everything has to fall in place and not everything has to make sense, so it's a little bit liberating in terms of how you could look at things. So the Gemara says, Demalohi, who says that the opinions in the Mishnayos are connected? Ad kan lo kamri Beis Shammai hasam elahecha dika deker notes. Beis Shammai was only mekel, was only lenient in the kisei hadam case. Why? Because you had a shovel in the ground, right? That's not just stama kula by Simchas Yom Tov. That's a pretty significant case. Shovel in the ground means, remember again, and if you go back, especially if you go back to that Gemara, shovel in the ground is only the first of a number of steps, right? Remember again how the Gemara constructed the case. At the end of the day, it's shovel in the ground. Therefore, there's no chofer. It was what else? What else? Loose soil. Therefore, no kesisha, right? Why isn't it a problem of bona digging a hole, right? Because why? You don't need the hole. You need what? The dirt. Rabbi Abba. So the truth is, when you put all of that together, it's not such a crazy kula that you have to start trying to make Beis Shammai the mekel in every single case. Aval heichad deleker deker no, it's low. But again, even Beis Shammai himself would agree that halacha l'maaseh, if you did not have a shovel in the ground, you could not go ahead and remove that dirt for kisei hadam. Inami, furthermore, ad kan lo kami Beis Hillel hacha ela dika toras kli alav. Furthermore, Beis Hillel is only mekel over here in the case of the ali. Why? Because the ali has the status of a kli. It has the status of, we'll say, also just to remind you, I'll just mention, because I just saw Yerachmiel take out his notebook. We still have more notebooks, by the way, from Maseches Beah. If anyone wants, I think I'll bring them out right now. I'll say he's going to bring them out. They should be the ones titled, Yerachmiel, thank you. Thank you. They should be the ones titled Beah on there, because there might be some left over from before also. In any event, Ad kan lo ka'amri, Beis Hillel hacha ela di ikataras kli alav. Furthermore, again, thank you. Furthermore, again, Beis Hillel is only mekel by the ali, by the pestle, because it has the status of a kli, right? It has the status of a kli, and therefore he allows you to use it as a cutting board. Aval hasam lo, but again, by the case of kisei hadam, he would not allow you to violate all of those malachos for the sake of Simchas Yom Tov. So I will say, so therefore, once again, the Gemara just shows you can't necessarily establish a pattern of Beis Shammai. So I will say that's really what the Gemara is struggling with. Can we establish a pattern of Beis Shammai always being the mekel by Simchas Yom Tov and Beis Hillel being the machmir? To which the Gemara essentially says, no, because the cases don't necessarily line up like that. But we'll say first wide line Yud Amud Aleph 10a. Ela kasha ha kasha. Rather, if you have a question, here's your question. Beis Shammai omrim ein nostenes ha'arlif ne'adarsan. These are great cases. Beis Shammai is supposed to say, Yom Tov, you shechted your animal. When you shecht an animal, what else do you have now? You have a hide. Now, how would you normally prepare a hide for use? It's actually very interesting. They would tan it. But one of the low-budget ways to tan your hide is spread it out in an area with high pedestrian traffic, right? Because essentially people are walking there anyway. They walk over the hide, and that's part of the tanning process. So the Mishnah says as follows. Beis Shammai says, son, you cannot go ahead and tan a hide. You can't give a hide to a tanner. Now Rashi says over here what that really means is lo yishtachenu b'makom drisas haraglayim. You can't go ahead and put out the hide in a place of high pedestrian traffic. Below yagbiu, nor should you lift up the hide. Ela imkin yesh alav kizayis basar, unless of course there is a kizayis of meat on the hide. In other words, if the hide has a kizayis of meat, then ultimately again it's movable. If it doesn't have a kizayis of meat, it's not movable. Beis Hillel matirin, and Beis Hillel says that halacha l'maaseh you're allowed to do it. Now, why does Beis Hillel allow you to do it? This is fascinating. Now, remember, isn't this an issue of muktzah? To which, look at Rashi, Beis Hillel matirin, kasaga daitcha mishum simchas yom tiv, de'i lo sharis lei lo shachit. Rabbi say this is fascinating. We don't necessarily think about this. You see, if I'm not allowed to put out the hide, so I guess apparently on some level, if you don't begin the tanning process soon after the shechita, I guess what ends up happening is the hide becomes untannable. If I can't spread out my hide on Yom Tiv, what's going to happen? People won't shecht. Right? This is incredibly important because, again, at the end of the day, getting the meat is one part of shechita, but you have a hide which is quite valuable as well. Beis Hillel says if we don't let people put out the hide, what's going to happen? They're not going to shecht. If they don't shecht, therefore that's going to deprive them of simchas Yom Tiv. So Beis Hillel essentially sets aside the halacha of muktzah in order to facilitate simchas Yom Tiv. So what do you see from here? That halacha l'maisa, Beis Hillel is the mekel and Beis Shammai is the machmir. To which the Gemara says, Alma gabe simchas Yom Tiv, Beis Shammai l'chumra, u Beis Hillel l'kula. So Moshe said, Urminhi, the Gemara is going to try to reconcile this. Moshe 5 lines down in the wide lines. Urminhi, so the Gemara says, Urminhi, hashochet chayev va'ov, b'yom tiv. Yet Rabbi say again, remember, this comes back to what we said before. But how do you reconcile this with the case of kisei hadam? Because once again, and now the Gemara is not even quoting it fully. Gemara just quotes like shorthand, right? Shochet chayev va'ov. In shochet chayev va'ov, Beis Shammai is the mekel, Beis Hillel is the machmir. So what's going on? Rabbi Yochanan once again comes along, Muchlefes Ashita. So Rabbi Yochanan says, just switch it around. It's Beis Shammai who allows you to spread out the hide, and Beis Hillel doesn't. Okay, and therefore that lines up with the positions by Kisei Hadam. To which the Gemara says, Mimai, again, resist the temptation to try to align the cases with each other, because maybe they're just different. Dilmalohi ad kalo kamar Beis Shammai hasam elahecha deika deker notes. Beis Shammai ultimately only allowed you to do the case of the Kisei Hadam when you had a shovel already put into the ground. Aval hecha deleka deker notes lo. But again, remember, even Beis Shammai would say if there's no shovel in the ground, you can't go ahead and dig out the dirt. Inam, another possibility is ad kalo kamar Beis Hillel hacha ela dechazi lemizga iluya. Furthermore, again, I will say, you know why Beis Hillel allows you to move the hide on Yom Tiv, even if it doesn't have the kizayis of meat? Why? Because it's fit for reclining on it. So as I will say, it was common that a person would just kind of spread out and relax on a hide. That's normal. So because that's considered to be normal, therefore that's a normative usage, and therefore I will say, essentially, really what Beis Hillel is saying is, leaving aside Simchas Yom Tiv, or in addition to Simchas Yom Tiv, a hide is not muktzah, because it has a permissible use, even if it doesn't have a kizayis of meat. So aval hasam lo, but in the case of kisei hadam, ultimately wouldn't hold that way. So I will say, so again, once again, we're just showing we can't necessarily establish a pattern of Beis Shammai always being the mekel, Beis Hillel always being the machmir, because the cases are a little bit different. Ali kasha kasha. Beis Shammai omrim, listen to this case, im misalkin es hatrisin b'yom tiv. Both say we saw this case before. We actually saw this in Shabbos. I think it was Shabbos or Eruvin. Okay, we'll see. We're going to see it again. Both sides want to point out all of these cases are mishnayos that we're going to go into Emir Hashem in this Masechta. So we'll see all of these sugyas in depth. You cannot remove. Both say trisin are literally shutters. Rashi says over here trisin daltos achalonos. So he calls them the doors of the windows. Right. So what's the door of a window? It's a shutter. But now watch this. Shel chanuyos shesogrin banachalonos balayla u'misalkin osam bayom v'nostin osam lifnehem v'shotchin aleyen tavlin limkar l'rabim u'biyom tov muter likach mechen v'ni amakir oso u'bavat shel yaskir siukom mekach. We'll say this is very interesting. So these trees and these shutters, they were at night when you closed up your store, they were used to close up the windows. By day, it's not like shutters like you think about on your house that like are set on a pivot, right? These shutters were put in and taken out. So at night they were put in, you closed up the store. And during the day, you took them out. They were used as tables to go ahead and sell your wares. Now we'll say, and here's what's fascinating. Food merchants were open on Yom Tiv. Jewish food merchants were open on Yom Tiv. Because for Ochel Nefesh, right, halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to cook. So what happened is, who would you go to? So you go to, or I shouldn't say, merchants were open. We'll see Jewish, non-Jewish. You could go ahead and purchase food or ingredients on Yom Tiv from a chenvini who knows you, as long as what? As long as what? As long as there's no price discussion. Again, we'll see this sugya. So as long as so again, Ruvain knows me. Ruvain the chenvini knows me. So I'm going to take 5 pounds of flour. Okay, so we're not talking any price, but he knows me. I know him. So after Yom Tov, I'll settle up with him. So now watch this. That's actually what we're focusing on. Are the shutters. Say misakin and satrisa Yom Tov. So you are not allowed to go ahead and Beis Shammai says you cannot remove the trisin on Yom Tov. Ubeis Hillel matirin af lahachzir. And Beis Hillel says that halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to go ahead and take them out and put them back. Now we'll say, now we're going to see, according to Beis Shammai, this is a problem of bona, a problem of building. So the Gemara says, Alma gabe simchas yom tiv Beis Shammai l'chor Beis Hillel kula. So you see that when it comes to simchas yom tiv, Beis Shammai is machmir, Beis Hillel is mekel. To which the Gemara says, but how do you reconcile that with the following? Or minhi, the Gemara says, I'll ask you a kasha. Hashochet chayiv ha'of b'yom tiv. If a person shechts a chayiv, once again, right? Beis Shammai allows you if the shovel is in the ground, he's mekel. Beis Hillel is machmir. Bishlama Beis Shammai lo kashya. Hasam diika deker notes. Hachaleka deker notes. So Beis Shammai is not contradicting himself. Why not? Because he's mekel in a very specific case, namely where the shovel is in the ground. That's the case where he is mekel. Ella Beis Hillel kashya. But how do you reconcile the shittas of Beis Hillel? Rabbi Yochanan muchlefes hashita. Okay, so we'll say that's always Rabbi Yochanan's go-to answer. Switch the positions around. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, it's Beis Shammai who allows for the removal and the returning of the trisin, of the shutters, and Beis Hillel prohibits it. To which the Gemara says, maybe not. Inami ad kan lo kamen Beis Hillel hacha ela mishum de'in binyan bekelim be'in stira bekelim. Once again, the Gemara answer will say that what? That halacha l'maisa, it's a different halachic discussion. What's the machlokes over here? Do we say that there is binyan and stira? Do the malachos of building and demolition apply to utensils or not? Rabbi says, so that is a raging machlokes in halacha, right? Everyone agrees that bona, right, binyan and stira, building and demolition, apply to something attached to the ground, or I should say even apply to the ground. The shaila is, do those malachos apply to utensils or not? Beis Hillel holds no. And therefore Beis Hillel says there's no problem taking out the shutters and putting back the shutters. Beis Shammai says yes. And therefore halacha l'maisa, there's a problem taking out and putting back. But the truth is that that's independent of their respective views by Simchas Yom Tov. Therefore, I will say the Gemara does not prove a pattern in Beis Shammai or Beis Hillel. So it turns out that halacha l'maisa, there are going to be cases of Simchas Yom Tov where Beis Shammai is mekel and Beis Hillel is machmir, and cases where Beis Hillel is machmir and Beis Shammai is mekel. And there's a simple reason for that, because each of these cases never fully centers only on the topic of Simchas Yom Tov. All of these cases involve secondary halachic considerations as well. Beautiful. New Mishnah. Beis Shammai Omrim. Beis Shammai Omrim. Lo yita ela im kenyanami ba'od yom. Both say this is great. We're back to the doves. Right? So in the last Mishnah, we spoke about moving the ladder in the dove coat. Right? Are you allowed to do that or not? In this Mishnah now we're speaking, and we'll go through the Shulchan Aruch with all of these cases. In this case, we have as follows. You know you want to take doves from the dove coat on Yom Tiv. So the Shaila Rabosai is, what level of preparation do you have to do? In other words, do the doves have to be prepared before Yom Tiv in order to go ahead and use them on Yom Tiv? Now, I will say we're going to see that this case is being illustrated by doves. And yet say we're not going to see this case. No one says you have to prepare your cow or your sheep, right? Or your chickens for that matter. Why? What's the difference? Well, I'll leave out chickens for now, right? But your cow and your sheep, I'll say, what's the difference? This comes into the difference between domesticated and non-domesticated animals. Domesticated animals are always considered to be muchan for use, right? They're considered to be ready. Okay? My cow's not going anywhere. My sheep's not going anywhere. Doves, because of the nature of doves, is that what? They come and go, right? They have the ability of flight. So therefore, interestingly enough, what the Mishnah is coming from the perspective of, in order to use it on Yom Tiv, there has to be a hachana. There has to be a preparation, right? It has to be set aside. The shaila is what type of preparation, or what type of preparation is the wrong word, designation. Does there have to be? So here we go. Beis Shammai omrim lo yitol ela im kein ne'emim ba'od yom. So Beis Hillel says, this is interesting. You have to go into the dovecote on, or I guess reach your hand into the dovecote on Erev Yom Tiv and pick up the ones you're going to use, right? Pick it up, put it down. Pick it up, put it down. Now, nanea could also mean just like, I guess like poke it, right? Move it. So the Gemara says, Mishnah says, sorry, Beis Hillel says, no. Omeid va'omer zev za'ani notel. Beis Hillel says you don't have to start moving doves, but rather all you need to do is to say what? Stand by the dovecote and say, I'm going to use that one, and that one. Good. Says the Gemara. The machlokes is with the first batch of doves. So we'll say, so apparently doves give birth to a new batch of offspring each and every month. Interestingly enough. So the Gemara says over here that the machlokes over here between Beis Shammai and Hillel is only with the first batch. The Beis Shammai Sabri, Beis Shammai says you have to go ahead. And interestingly enough, the general derech is actually interesting. This is good to know in case you're getting into doves. The general thing with dove farming, dove cultivation, dove raising, is you usually leave the first batch. You don't take them to eat because they're the company for the mother. So the machlokes Yeshayim Beis Hillel is when you're going to slaughter the first doves on Yom Tov itself. That's where Beis Shammai says you literally have to pick up and put down the ones that you want. Beis Hillel says you just have to designate it. Because what's the concern over here? The Beis Shammai Savri Gazrinan Asilam Luche. Beis Shammai says we're concerned that halacha l'maisa you're going to change your mind. Now what does that mean? Take a look at Rashi. Gazrinan Ki shakiluhu l'machar Asila Amluche v'chayis alayhu v'havili tiltul shelo l'tzorech. This is fascinating. Beis Shammai is concerned like this. You're going to show up to the dovecote tomorrow, and then you're going to pick up the little doves, and you're going to have rachmanis. You're going to say, the mother's going to be all alone. You're going to put the doves back down. And it turns out that what if you do that, what's going to happen? You've moved a muktzah item for no purpose. Right? In other words, you've moved Balei Chaim, you've moved off livestock for animals for no purpose on Yom Tiv. So, however, listen to this. Beis Shammai holds that if you go Erev Yom Tiv and you pick it up and you designate it, we're not concerned you're going to have a change of heart on Yom Tiv itself. Now, what's the logic? The Rebbe said this is actually quite fascinating. Beis Shammai holds that essentially, if you do a concrete maisa on Erev Yom Tiv, you've started the process. Which will say such an incredible yisod. Say in life, it's easy to go ahead and not do something when you haven't started it, right? So if I haven't designated anything, and I show up on Yom Tiv and I pick it up and I look at it and it's so cute and I see the tear in the mother dove's eye. Now you're taking her young. So again, I might have a change of heart. But if Erev Yom Tiv, I begin the process. Once you begin the process, we're confident that you're going to follow through on it. Now, of course, again, I want to be clear, you don't have to eat the doves. In other words, if you have a change of menu, that's fine. What we're concerned about is being metaltal, right? Moving the doves on Yom Tiv and not ending up using them. That's what Beis Shammai is concerned about. So if you begin the process on Erev Yom Tiv by actively picking them up, we know you'll follow through. If you don't, we're concerned that you're going to pick it up and have a change of heart. Which again, the incredible yisod, that in life, if you want to accomplish something, sometimes the most important thing is get started. Because if you get started, there's a heightened statistical probability that you'll actually do it. Masha'in Kain, when you don't get started, that's where all the cheshbonos come up, right? We'll say we have this all the time. I had this plan. If I don't start it now, Lemaisa, there's 1,000,001 reasons why I come up with why I can't get done. Beis Hillel is not concerned about that. But in the second batch means anything after the first. Everyone agrees that all you need to do is what? You don't have to lift up anything. Rather, all you need to do is verbally designate it. Beautiful. So Rabbi said, the Gemara now asks, according to Beis Hillel, why do you have to say zeh v'zeh? Right. So Beis Shammai is requiring you literally to go over to each dove that you're going to take and lift it up on Erev Yom Tiv. Beis Hillel says you have to lift it up, but you have to say, I'm going to take this one, and this one. Why? Why can't you just stand in front of the dovecote and what? Say, Mikan ani nota lamachar. I'm taking doves from here. I have to designate this dove, that dove. Just say, I'm taking doves from here tomorrow. Well, maybe you'll say, Beis Hillel doesn't subscribe to the concept of Breira, because they will say that idea works very well if you hold of Breira, right? Namely, retroactive clarification. So the next day, if you on Erev Yom Tov, you stand there and you say, Mikan ani ochel, from here I'm taking tomorrow, and then the next day you show up and you take a couple of doves, it turns out that it's retroactively clarified that that's what you took. Was that what you intended for from Erev Yom Tov? Is that true that Beis Hillel doesn't hold the Breira? Now we learned, Hameis babayis, if you have a corpse in a house, V'lo psachim harbe, and I will say, here's the case. You have a corpse in a house, and there are many exits or doorways from the house. So what's the halacha? Kulan tameim. They will say, now any kalim that are under those doorways, by definition, will be tamei tomas meis. Niftach echad mehen. However, if one of the doorways is open, hu tamei v'kulan torin. They will say, just the short synopsis of this halacha is as follows. If you have many doorways in a home, and there's a corpse in the home, on a technical level, only the doorway through which the mace is going to be brought out ultimately conveys tumah, right, to anything underneath it. The shaila is when you have many different doorways and it's not immediately clear which doorway you're using to take the mace out. So that's how the Mishnah says, if one of the doorways is open, the utensils underneath that doorway are tameh. V'kulan tar, and everything else is tar. Chashav lo tzil be'echad mehen, o b'chalon sheish bo arba al arba. If you had in mind to take out the mace from one entrance, or for that matter, through a window that was at least 4 tefachim by 4 tefachim, matzeles akola psachin kulan. So intention to take the mace out of one of the exits, by definition, saves the rest from tumah. Beishamai omrim, when is that so? V'hu shechashav lo tzio ad shelo yamos hameis. Beishamai says, yeah, that's true, as long as what? As long as you had that intention when? Before the person died. Beis Hillel omrim af mishe yamos hameis. And Beis Hillel says, no, even if you had that intention when? After the person died, which I both say essentially means what? That you're relying on what? Breira. So the Gemara says, ha itmar alo amarabba letares apsochem mikanalaba. Rabba said about that, even Beis Hillel both say, that only works to go ahead and create tara for the other entrances going forward. It doesn't work retroactively, so it's not really a din of breira. In mafreya lo. Rava Amarabba says no. The olam lemafreya. Rava says it even works ultimately again retroactively. In other words, Rava says so. Therefore, again, it is a din of breira. So Beis Hillel is literally saying is that halacha lemaisa. Once you go ahead and you decide on a way that the mace is going to be taken out, even though when are you deciding this? After the mace died, retroactively it's been clarified that that is the exit for the mace, and therefore there was no tumah in anywhere else in the home. So I will say, so Beis Hillel does hold a breira. Then I will say, if Beis Hillel holds a breira, so let's take a step back. If Beis Hillel holds a breira, then what? Then in the case of the doves of Erev Yom Tiv, what should you be able to do? What should you be able to do? Just stand by the entranceway and say what? Say what? I'm taking from here tomorrow. You don't have to say, I'm taking this one, I'm taking that one. Just say, I'm taking from here tomorrow. That's it. And then tomorrow, on Yom Tov, when you come and you take the doves, it becomes retroactively clarified which ones you had in mind. But yet, that's not what the Mishnah says. Right? The Mishnah says that according to Beis Hillel, you have to stand, you don't have to lift them up, but you have to say what? Zeh, zeh, zeh. You have to identify. V'ha'chahainu taima, dilma metaltel, v'shavik, metaltel, v'shavik, become metaltel midi delo chazile. We'll say, what are we concerned about Beis Hillel? We're concerned that if you don't actively designate them on Erev Yom Tov, what's going to happen? You're going to come to the dove coat on Yom Tov, you're going to lift up a dove. You're going to say, I'm going to take this one. And then what's going to happen? It's too scrawny. It's too little. You're going to put it back. Or you pick up a dove. It's too zaftig, right? It's too big. I want something a little bit smaller, right? So the concern, and then what ends up happening? So I will say, the act of handling animals without using them at the end of the day is a problem of muktzah. So in order to avoid that, Beis Hillel says, actively designate on Erev Yom Tov which ones you want to take. And that way, again, I will say it's the same yesod. Sometimes you just have to commit to something, right? There are always people who are focused on what's the next best thing. Sometimes what you just have to do is pick up what you have, right? Designate what you have and go forward with it. So the Gemara says, "V'ha amrit ba'omid va'omer zev v'zani notel sagya." But 1 second. But Pestle doesn't require you to lift up each one. Pestle just requires you to do what? To stand and say zev v'zani omid. Tush Gemara says, you're right. Hani mili me'erev yamtiv. That's true ultimately again on Erev Yom Tiv. So on Erev Yom Tiv, it's enough just to go ahead and stand by the entranceway of the dovecote and say, I'll take this one, and that one. Ava b'Yom Tiv aser. But remember, Beis Hillel would not allow you to do this on Yom Tiv. So you're both say, interestingly enough, according to Beis Hillel, apparently if you did not designate the doves on Erev Yom Tiv, then what? On Yom Tiv, you can't take them. You can't take them. Ava b'Yom Tiv aser. Why? Tizdimnin demishtachchi shmeinim kechushim. Because Beis Hillel would literally be concerned that what? That Allah Chalamaysa, if you don't designate them on Erev Yom Tov, what's going to happen? You're going to pick one of them up on Yom Tov. You thought it was bigger and it's thinner. You thought it was thinner and it was bigger. Right, so look at Rashi. Aval b'Yom Tiv, first Rashi Yom Beis. Kishabal levarim b'Yom Tiv, kilomar shelo ber dvarav mi ba'od yom, v'somich abadikas malchar she'ivdak is kulan. So ultimately, it's very important. So therefore, what's happening over here, according to Beis Hillel, is not really a din of Bora, Breira. Beis Hillel holds of Breira, right? He holds of the concept of retroactive clarification, as we saw by the case of the mace. What's happening over here is Beis Hillel is concerned that if you are not committed to particular doves, what's going to end up happening? You're going to show up at the dovecote in Erev Yom Tov. You're going to pick up. You're going to say, nah, put it down. Pick up, nah, put it down. And that's a problem of being metaltal ba'alei chayim, moving muktzah on Yom Tiv for no specific purpose. Beis Hillel is trying to avoid that. How? Erev Yom Tiv, you identify. Erev Yom Tiv, you commit to a dove. And once you commit to the dove, you're in. At that point, we're not concerned that you're going to swap it out for something else. Incredible. Inami, zinin de mishtachachei kulo kechushim v'shavek lehu. It's interesting. There's another issue. The issue is if you show up at the dovecote, and in fact, all of them, maybe it's just a scrawnier brood, right? There's a scrawnier group, so you'll decide not to take anything. Va'asi la'amnuye misimchas Yom Tiv. And you'll end up not having simchas Yom Tiv because you won't have meat. We'll say this is also, again, also interesting that Chazal wanted us to have simchas Yom Tiv. We'll say what it also says is something amazing. It's an incredible yisod in simcha. We'll say sometimes, not sometimes, the key to happiness in life is finding happiness in your present circumstances. You see, the reason why people often can't find happiness is because they construct sentences that go like this. I'll be happy when. When? If you have a sentence structure that goes, I'll be happy when, you'll never be happy. You'll never be happy. Right? I'll be happy when I have more this, less this. Then again, if you hinge your happiness on some future events that may or may not occur, then ultimately, again, you're tola b'das achirim, you outsource your happiness. The key to happiness in life is finding simcha in your current circumstances. It's a scrawny batch, eat a lot of them, right? So in other words, so the Gemara is saying over here, so what we want you to do is, we're concerned if you don't actively designate it and commit on Erev Yom Tiv, you're going to I'll wait till next Yom Tiv. No, that's not the way Simcha, it's not the way Simchas Yom Tiv works. Commit, find the happiness even in the scrawny doves, find the happiness even in the current circumstances, and ultimately, again, don't wait until some future date. Incredible Yisod. Beautiful. Mishnah. What says everything you ever wanted to know about doves? There's a lot. Here we go. This is actually an interesting case. Zimein shchorim umatza levanim. We'll say, watch this case. So now, I followed Beis Hillel's advice. That's how he passed it. I followed Beis Hillel's advice. And I went over to the dovecote on Erev Yom Tiv. And they said, okay, I'm going to eat this one, this one, this one. But we'll say, let's say, again, on Erev Yom Tiv, I designated black doves. Umatza levanim. I come back Yom Tiv morning, and what do I find? White doves. Levanim umatza shchorim. Or ultimately, again, I designated white doves, and I went ahead and found black doves. Or shnayim umatza shlosha. Interestingly enough, I went ahead and I found two. I designated two, and I come back Baruch Hashem, and I find three. Asurim. All these cases are asur. All these cases are asur. We'll discuss why. Shlosha matzah shnayim. What happens if on Erev Yom Tov you designated two doves, right? Sorry, three doves. And what happens? You come back on Yom Tov and what? You find 2 mutarim. Ultimately, again, the doves are mutar. B'sochakan. What happens if you designated the doves while they were in the dovecote? Umatzalif neakan, and you found them outside of the dovecote. We'll discuss. There was like a little ledge, a porch, on the dovecote. So asurim. Ultimately, they're asur. V'im ein sham elaheim. But if there are no other doves except for these, harehem mutarim, hare elu mutarim. Then ultimately they'll be mutar. It's good. So we'll identify. We'll explain the case. So we'll say pshita. So we'll say, so now, what's the case of the white doves and the black doves? In other words, we'll say, the Gemara says, okay, if on Erev Yom Tov, I went ahead and I designated black doves, and I come back on Yom Tov and there's white doves, it's pretty clear that what happened, right? Right? We'll say, like, this isn't that like they identify differently now, right? This is Lamaisa again, that it's actually like different doves. It's different doves, right? In other words, that they were black, now they're white. So of course it's asur. It's a different batch. It's a different batch. Remember, I will say this because that's what I said before. The reason why doves in general need hazmana, the reason why they need to be set aside is because since they're non-domestic, they come and go. So halacha l'maisa, it's a different set of doves. So what's the what? Of course it's asur. To which the Gemara said, what's the pshat? Amar Rabba, hacha mayaskinon, kigon, watch this, kigon, shezimein shchorim ulevanim. Erev Yom Tov, I have 2 batches of doves. I have white doves and I have black doves. And I designated both on Erev Yom Tov. V'hishkim umatzah shchorim b'makom levanim, or levanim b'makom shchorim. So I'll say, so what happens? The white doves live in one compartment, and the black doves live in a different compartment. And here's what's interesting. The next morning, I show up, and they switch, and now the black doves are where the white doves were, the white doves were where the black doves were. So we'll say, now, there are 2 conclusions you could potentially draw in this situation. What would you have thought? Ma'odatema, hani inhu, ninhu, v'ishapuche yishapich. Again, I could draw the logical conclusion that what? It's all the same doves. Just what happened? A little house swapping, right? The dovecote swapping, right? That's all that happened over here. The black ones moved here, the white ones moved here, but bepashtus, it's the same doves. Kamash malon, no. Kamash on the Mishnah teaches me, Hanach azlu la'alma v'hani achrini ninhu. To which the Gemara says, no, that's not what we assume happened. In fact, what we assumed happened is the black doves and the white doves that you designated on Erev Yom Tov, they're gone. The ones who are here now in the different locations, new doves. And I will say, this actually yields a fascinating halachic conclusion. Listen to this. Rov v'karov halach achar harov. I will say, this is very interesting. So Chanina says, in general, I will say, let's say you have a situation, and we're not sure how to clarify it. And if you go after proximity will yield one conclusion. And if you go ahead and you go after rove will yield a different conclusion. I will say, this is a perfect case like this. Think about this just a moment. Erev Yom Tov, you went ahead and you designated the white doves and the black doves. So let's just say, for argument's sake, the white doves were in the left dovecote, the black doves are in the right dovecote. What happens? You show up the next morning and they're switched, right? The black ones are in the left, right? The white ones are in the right. So I will say, there are 2 ways that you could clear this shaila, right? 2 ways you could pass in this shaila. Number 1, karov. Look at proximity. Based on proximity, what would we say? It's the same doves. Yet if we go after rove, what does rove say? The majority of the doves in the world are not the doves I had in my dovecote on Erev Yom Tov. So rove would tell me, these are new doves. So I must say, this is fascinating. When you have a conflict between karov and rove, which one wins? To which the Gemara says, rove. Rove wins over karov, which is really fascinating. Majority wins over proximity. And therefore, halacha l'maisa, we assume these are new doves, and therefore, halacha l'maisa, I cannot use them on Yom Tov. Really quite interesting. So the Gemara says, furthermore, good. Abaye, Kidamra Abaye, halach acharov. Kidamra Abaye bedaf, hachanami bedaf. So we'll say, what's the pshat over here? Kidamra bedaf, look at Rashi. Bedaf, first white line in Rashi. Sheyesh la'adaf lifnei hashavach bolet v'yotzei menu v'sham bain v'yoshin yonim de'alma tadir shireim likani. So we'll say, furthermore, Abaye said, what's the case? The case we're going to see is just a little bit, where there's like a ledge in front of the dovecote. Now, when you have a ledge in front of the dovecote, what does that invite? What does that invite? Visiting doves, right? Visiting doves, right? Not everybody has a space in the dovecote, right? But if you have a ledge, that invites doves from the world to be able to come. So because you have a ledge, therefore, again, that invites doves from the row, from the rest of the world to come. And therefore, when you find your black doves and white doves in different places in their dovecotes, right, different dovecotes the next morning, we assume it's not the same doves and they switched places, but rather what? We assume it's new doves. Panim chadoshos bo lekan. New doves, and therefore they will be aser on Yom Tov. Incredible. Let's go weiter. Shloshu matzah shnai mutarin. So also remember again, the Mishnah said that if you went ahead and you started out with three, shnayim. I skipped. Shnayim umatzah shlosha asurin. Right. So also listen to this. If you designated on Yom Tov 2 doves, and you come to the dovecote on Yom Tov, and now there are 3 doves, they're aser. I will say, it's easy to say, the Rebbe Shalom loves me. Look how much he loves me. Right? I only designated 2, he gave me 3. The Gemara says, no, that's not the cheshbon. Cheshbon does love you, but it's a different cheshbon. Manav shach, the Gemara says, i'achrini ninhu, ha'achrini ninhu. So I'll say, ultimately, again, if it's another dove, it's another dove, right? In other words, that lemaisa, again, all I know is that there's a dove that I did not designate. So because there's a dove that I didn't designate, so ultimately, again, it's there. But so bottom line, the Gemara says over here that halacha lemaisa, no matter how I look at this case, there's something here that I did not designate. And what? See, there are 2 possibilities. 2 possibilities are either it's totally 3 new doves that I did not designate on Erev Yom Tov, or even if it's not 3 new doves, but it's only what? 1 new dove plus the 2 that I designated. The assumption is no matter how much I love my doves, I can't tell them apart, right? So Lamais, again, there's a new dove mixed in there, which precludes the use of the entire batch. Okay, next case, that's Shnai Matzah Shlosha. Next case was Shlosha Matzah Shnai Mutarin. On the other hand, if you designated 3, and the next morning you show up and you find 2, you're allowed to use the 2. My taima, hani inhu ninu, v'chad minayhu azla alma. Because we'll say, ultimately, again, what we assume is, look, that the 2 that are left are part of the original batch, but the 3rd flew away. In other words, we assume that those 2 are still the same 2, just the 3rd one flew away, to which our Mishnah must reflect the view of Rebbe and not Rabbanan. We'll say we'll at least begin this today, then we'll have to stop. Listen to this. Disanya. We'll say this is a fascinating case. Hanach, manach, umatzah masayim. We'll say this is about money of Meiser Sheni. So imagine for a moment you have a chest in which you keep your Meiser Sheni, right? Meiser Sheni is, remember, produce that you separate out that you have to take to Yerushalayim. So I went ahead and I put my money, I put $100 of Meiser Sheni in a box, my Meiser Sheni box. And lo and behold, I open up my Meiser Sheni box, and what do I find? 200. What's the halacha? Chulin u'Meiser Sheni mu'urav zebal de'divrei Rebbe. Rebbe assumes that what must have happened over here is I inadvertently put chulin money in that box as well. So 100 is Meiser Sheni, 100 is chulin. The Chachamim say hakol chulin. The Chachamim say no, everything is chulin. Everything is chulin. Ultimately, again, why? Because the Chachamim work on the premise people do not mix Meiser Sheni and chulin money together. So if you open that box up and you find extra money, it must be that you removed the Meiser Sheni money at some point in time, but you forgot that you did it, and now you just deposited chulin money in here. So all of the money in there is chulin. We'll stop over here. We'll have to pick up a Mirat Hashem with this case tomorrow. It's really very interesting, and then we'll take the Meiser Sheni case and the Mirat Hashem, link it back together with the 3, which become 2 as of Yom Tov morning. Shkar Chabosai. I'll see you Rita. And Rita, thank you. It was delicious.